I mean, one of the things, what's really interesting to me is the Muslims had no interest in proving the existence of God. Their obsession was proving the prophecy of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All their books are about proving he was a prophet. Because if you prove he was a prophet, ipso facto, there must be a God because he sent him. So their whole thing was to prove, Imam al-Bayhaqi wrote a huge multi-volume work called Dalail al-Nubuwah. And he said, here's the proof that he's a prophet. The Prophet ﷺ predicted many, many things that have come true. That in the 7th century in Arabia, it just would not have been possible to predict those things, or they wouldn't even occur to people. And people say, well, Nostradamus did that, so what, is he a prophet? The predictions of Nostradamus are so obscure. And anyway, there's an argument that he had access to certain Jewish tradition because they had the signs of the end of time as well. So it's not, there are definitely signs that have not come. And all the Buddhists have signs of the end of time, the Hindus have signs, the Kali Yuga age, the Hindus talk about the signs when children will no longer obey their parents. Parents have always had trouble with children, but not like today. Something is very different, which doesn't mean the end of time's around the corner. I'm not suggesting that, and I think that's a dangerous approach to take, but it's certainly closer than it was 1400 years ago, and arguably much closer. And there are many signs that should be troubling to people. The Prophet predicted same-sex marriage. That's a sound hadith. He said the end of time will not come until a man marries a man and a woman marries a woman. And we have no evidence in human history that that was ever, we have no evidence that any culture has ever sanctioned same-sex marriage. But he said it will be one of the signs of the end of time. He said you will see nikah al-rajul al-rajul wa nikah al-mar'ati al-mar'a. And nikah here means clearly marriage because homosexuality existed, so he wasn't talking about homosexuality or musahaqa. He was talking about marriage. So, he predicted that the buildings of Mecca would surpass the mountains. Who could have thought of that in the 7th century of Arabia? Who could have thought of that? He predicted that people would fly in the air. He predicted that people would go out of their houses with things on their thighs that would tell them what was happening back in their families. He said that people would talk to shiraku na'alihi, which in Arabic, shiraku na'al is this. That is what a shiraku na'ali, which is the universal sign today for telephone. And he said a man will talk to his shiraku na'al. That's how people say it, right? The Arabs call that shiraku na'al. So all of those are aspects of the Prophet. And then the fact that he was predicted by previous revelations. He's predicted in the Dhammapada. There's a Hindu professor that proved that he was predicted in the scriptures in Sanskrit. He wrote a whole book on the Kalki avatar. And he didn't become Muslim. That's what's so weird about it. But he said it could be nobody else but Mohammed. It has to be him. So he was predicted in the Old Testament. What was Salman al-Farisi doing in Arabia? He was looking for the last prophet. He'd been told about him. Why were the Jews in Yathrib? There's a lot nicer places to live for the Jews at that time. They came from Sham. Why would they live in Yathrib, middle of the Arabian desert? Because they actually believed that the last prophet was coming from that place. There were rabbis in Yemen who knew that he was coming. 80 years before the prophet was born, there was a Yemeni chieftain that tried to take over Medina, and when he found out it was the place of the last prophet, he made a waqf, which is where the prophet's house was. And he said, I want this to be where that prophet lives. These are all recorded. The Prophet ﷺ predicted the Baghdad is predicted, the circular city that would be destroyed, many things. So, in the end, man sha'a falyu'min, whoever wants, let him believe. Wa man sha'a falyakfur, whoever wants, let him disbelieve. It's a choice. In the end of the day, it is a choice. Let people believe, let them disbelieve. It's a choice. What we should strive for is common weal, right? We should have even secular values, acknowledge common weal.